Excellent. All right. All right, so we're going to reconvene. So thank you all. It is 2 o'clock, so that means that we are 20 minutes behind schedule, which is not terrible. Next we're going to, if you could all take your seats, that would be really great. The next presenter, I'd like to ask up Mark Woelders. Mark, are you with us?
Yes.
Oh, hello, Mark. Welcome.
Hi, I'm with you.
Hi. Mark is a mathematical finance student from the Warwick Business School with a background in econometrics, and he's going to present his paper, Market Depth and Liquidity Provision Profitability Uniswap. So you're going to talk about Uniswap. So Mark?
Maybe.
Oh, maybe. Okay, Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much.
Let us know if you have any technical problems.
If you can hear me, then I don't have any technical problems. And if you can see my presentation, then it should be all right.
We can hear you. We can see the first slide. Can you swap to the next slide just so that we can verify that that works? Great. Done. Over to you.
Okay. 1.7 billion people have not access to a bank account worldwide. From these 1.7 billion people, 2/3 of them do have a smartphone and they do have access to the internet. And I think that's where what DeFi, decentralized finance, is mainly about. And today I will talk about Uniswap, which is part of the DeFi financial ecosystem, I would say. And specifically, I will talk about market depth and liquidity provision profitability in this protocol. My name is Mark Woelders, and yeah, I'm glad to be here, and I hope all you have enjoyed everything so far already, and that you have had a great lunch. The audience, I think, is a bit broad, so I'll try to make sure that I explain first the core concepts a bit, what I'm talking about, and then the financial regulators might be more interested in that, and I touch upon some more of the academic stuff as well. So
no problem, Mark. You've got the only problem is the constraint of time, which unfortunately you've only got 28 minutes.
Yeah. All right. So the main question is, does Uniswap V3 offer more market depth, where liquidity providers earn higher returns on their capital than in Uniswap V2? That's the research question, and I just start with this to show that it consists of two main components: the market depth and the liquidity provision profitability. But first, we need to understand what Uniswap is, what Uniswap V2 is, what Uniswap V3 is. Right. So, as already said, 1.7 billion do not have a bank account worldwide, and that's what the World Bank estimates. So there are actually three goals of the DeFi movement. Maybe some have already talked about DeFi, but one is like easy payment. My girlfriend is from the United States of America, and it's quite difficult actually to transfer money to her, which shouldn't be so difficult, you would say. The accessibility that's already been covered, and maybe also transparency, because I couldn't have actually done this research without the availability of data. So if you look at CeFi, there's centralized finance, where you have an intermediate party that basically regulates the financial transactions. The data is not so publicly available at all, and now I have data from the millisecond from every single transaction worldwide through the blockchain. So that's extremely valuable, and that makes the play field also extremely fair in that sense. So Uniswap is an exchange, so that's used to swap specific coins. And you have a centralized exchange and a decentralized exchange, and centralized exchange is more what you probably already know from regular finance, I would say. So that works with limit order books, and basically the limit order books and the orders in that limit order book, they define basically the prices, and usually you also have like a market maker or a high frequency trader these days, and they actually set these bid and ask prices, and the spread is the money they make. You basically trade usually against like a market maker rather than another individual. The problem with this, of course, is, for example, FTX that has been in the news already. Yeah, of course, there's an intermediate party between these transactions, and if one goes bankrupt, then yeah, your money is gone. So decentralized exchanges work with so-called liquidity pools and automated market makers, and Uniswap and SushiSwap are examples of such an exchange that just works with a blockchain, and there's no actual intermediate party. So liquidity pool, then you think maybe something like this. So how does it work? You have liquidity providers, and you have the swap, you have swappers that want to swap coins, and you have an algorithm which is basically the liquidity pool. The liquidity pool can contain, for example, Bitcoin and Ethereum, like two different coins, and the ratio of these coins basically determines the price. So it's yeah, the access of these coins in those pools, the ratio between those two basically decides the price with respect to the other coin. That's what the core concept is built on. And that core concept is extremely easy, actually. That's called an automated market maker. And Uniswap is an example of a constant product market maker that works with the reserve curve, which is X times Y equals K, and X is then the amount of, for example, Bitcoin, and Y the Ethereum in that pool. And implicitly, this very simple formula that defines the price, yeah, with respect to the other coin. And yeah, it's actually amazing already that Uniswap consists of only 378 lines of code. It's extremely simple, actually. Nevertheless, the mathematics can become more complicated the more you zoom into things, but this is the core concept. So here we do. I will show you an example of a swap. So we want to trade some amount of token Y for some amount of token X. Then one needs to deposit an amount of delta Y to the liquidity pool and receives an amount of delta X in return, such that that reserve curve still holds. So that's the whole point of it, that whatever trade you do, the reserve curve has to be equal to K at all times. And that defines basically the price by the differential. So that is K divided by X squared, or K divided by Y squared if you look at the other coin. So this is a numerical example of a swap. So suppose we start at T is 0. And there's 60.67 Bitcoin in the pool versus 250 Ethereum. Let then Bitcoin be token X and Ethereum be token Y. Then at T is 0, then we calculate what this constant product is. So you do X0 times Y0, and that equals 4,167. For this specific example, of course, it doesn't have to be the case for every liquidity pool. Now we want to buy two pieces of Bitcoin at time T is 1. So we take 2 pieces of Bitcoin out of this liquidity pool. So we end up with 14.67 Bitcoin in the liquidity pool at T is 1. Then the question is, how much Ethereum did you have to pay for this? So then, because the concept, the reserve curve formula has to hold, we simply fill in the formula again and see what's left. So then we see that the delta Y1 is, and I cannot see that actually myself because my face is in front of that. But you can see then quite easily by filling in this formula that you need 34 Ethereum to get 2 Bitcoin from this liquidity pool. And of course, then if you want to have 1 Bitcoin, you need to pay 17 Ethereum. Obviously, this is not like a realistic example, I think, for the ratio of these 2 coins. But it is exactly how it works, nothing more, nothing less, actually. Okay, so now the main difference, Uniswap version 2 and version 3. In version 2, liquidity providers, they have to give these tokens to the pool, to the liquidity pool, and they basically provide liquidity on the full range of prices, so from 0 to infinity. However, as you can imagine, that there's a lot of coins in these liquidity pools, but if you do like a little swap, then the majority of these coins is actually not used. So in a way, it's not so efficient, you could say. For Uniswap version 3, we work with concentrated liquidity. And it basically means that you can say, okay, within this specific price range, my liquidity is gonna work. So you concentrate your liquidity in a specific range, call it a position, basically. Uniswap claims that this is even 4,000 times as capital efficient as Uniswap 2. You also have like different fee structures in Uniswap v3, but I'll skip that for now. This is more important because to allow this this concentrated liquidity, we need to tweak the reserve curve a little bit for version 3, and we do that, as you can see here by this formula. So what it actually means is that Uniswap version 2, the curve relates to the total pool, basically. The reserve curve relates to the total pool. But actually in Uniswap v3, every position has his own, basically his own liquidity pool, you could actually say. So if you also fill in like 0 for PA and for PB you fill in infinity, then you actually end up with x times y equals k again. So you don't have to have a narrow range of you don't have to provide a narrow range of liquidity per se in Uniswap version 3, but most of them do. There's a graphical representation of how that works. It's basically a transformation of that reserve curve x times y equals k, such that you only need reserves for this specific position, to basically hold. So the data description, I already talked a bit about that. Like you can get so much different data from the blockchain, but the main data points are actually for this topic, like swaps, mints, and burns. So mints is adding liquidity, burns is removing liquidity. And I looked at USDC versus Ethereum only, so basically US dollar against Ethereum. I have a MacBook from 2012, so it almost exploded with the code already. So, but you can replicate the research for more coins. But I focus on US dollar and Ethereum now, as is also almost the largest liquidity pool in total value locked in. So as you can see, actually the swaps, this is the daily frequencies, the mean daily frequencies of these both exchanges. What is actually extremely noticeable is that there is way more mints and way more burns done per day in Uniswap v3 rather than Uniswap v2. So the liquidity providers seem to be way more active in this version. But why is that actually? So this is maybe an interesting problem for the academics around. So Uniswap v3, if you're you set your PA and PB, so your prices, and if the current price is within your range, then you make fee income. But when the price is outside of that range, then you don't have any fee income at all. So it's an interesting problem actually, because like how do you set this range and when do you update this range? So you can see at the start, and everything is like the price is within your boundaries, and then it goes out of the boundary, but then it goes back in again. But you don't know that in advance, of course. So an extremely difficult problem actually. What is the optimal strategy to provide liquidity in Uniswap v3? And my idea was actually you might be able to solve that with a stochastic optimal control problem. So it's an interesting for maybe the researchers around. I've not solved that myself, but it's an extremely difficult problem, I think. Okay, so then we start about market depth. So M delta is we define as the market depth. It's the amount of token X that can be exchanged for token Y for a given delta % of price impact. So let's say 2% price impact. Why are we actually interested in market depth at all? It is basically, if you want to swap, you don't want to make an extremely large price impact, of course. So if you want to be able to have a market that is able to withstand large volume transactions, then you need a large market depth in that sense. And yeah, theoretically, the liquidity providers can provide the same market depth in Uniswap v3 while putting less capital at risk. So Uniswap v3 would therefore theoretically be more capital efficient. So now we go a bit into the mathematics. So this is the derivation of the market depth in version 2. So we recall that the price can be written as k divided by x squared, and x is then of course the token X. And you can rewrite this as in multiple ways. And then after a trade of delta units of token X for delta units of token Y, the reserve curve becomes X plus delta X times Y plus delta Y equals L squared. Like that's a post-trade equation. We've seen it already in our example that is the post-trade equation. And from the definition of market that we're interested in the delta X for a given price impact delta. So we let the price of 0 at time 0 be Y divided by X. And of course, at P1, you have Y plus delta Y divided by X plus delta X as your price at the next period. Then we would like to solve for this delta X because we are interested in this delta X because that is the definition of the market depth. So therefore, we solve the equation P1 divided by P0 minus 1 equals delta. That is the same as as the equation you see on the top of the screen. And if we simply then take the minus 1 to the other side, you have delta plus 1. That is what you see here. I don't know if you actually can see my mouse where I'm pointing at. But if you substitute that in the post-trade equation and you then finally solve for delta X, you get this nice, beautiful expression of the market depth. Maybe now as you see it at first, it is maybe a bit hard to get your head around in this couple of seconds, but it's relatively easy. It's just high school mathematics, I would say. However, for the market depth of Uniswap P3, it's way more complicated, as some liquidity providers provide liquidity in the range, let's say between 1 Bitcoin and 1.5 Bitcoin, and someone else provides between 1.1 Bitcoin and 1.6 Bitcoin. So everyone has their own position in this stack of positions, basically. So in a way, you need to be very smart in how to add all these liquidities together and see what positions are active and inactive, and then you can get such a nice distribution as you see on the screen. That everyone is mainly that most of liquidity is around the mid price, I would say. And once the prices become more unrealistic in a way, people tend to not provide much liquidity in that area. And the big difference between V2, if you have the same graph for Uniswap V2, you would see just a uniform distribution of liquidity, basically, because you are only allowed to provide liquidity over the entire range of possible prices. Yeah, the mathematics of this market depth V3 in a theoretical sense is quite difficult. Also, from a coding point of view, it is not as easy actually to add all these liquidities together. But I've put the result formula of the market depth down below. So basically, you add the summation stands for that you sum up basically all the liquidity of token X plus all the liquidity of token Y, and you convert it then such that the expression is in the same token. So you do it times the price basically, and then you add all these liquidities up. That gives you the market depth, and then you divide by 1/s, since different fee structures have different tick spacing. Because sorry, I forgot to mention that, but like it's then best if you have to add all the liquidities to work with tick spaces rather than pricing, because the tick spacing is the smallest step you can make in this pricing. So it's easy to add up all these liquidities per tick spacing basically. So this is then what you get. This is a graph of the market depth from version 2 and version 3 over time. Note that on the y-axis, that's the depth in millions of US dollars, USDC. But also note that the y-axis they differ for each version. So you can already see from the order of magnitude that V3 has way higher market depth for a price impact of 2%. And some interesting maybe data points is actually the correlation coefficient is around 0, which is quite interesting because you would maybe expect it to move in a similar direction, because when bad things happen, then in, for example, Ethereum, then people tend to move away from those liquidity pools and take the liquidity out. And but of course, it can also be that people from version 3 all of a sudden move their liquidity from version 3 to version 2, so they also move in the opposite direction. So on the 8th of November, Ethereum had an all-time high. So then both V2 and V3 market depth went up. In the beginning, on the 1st of May, there was the introduction of Uniswap V3. You could see a bit of an outflow in version 2, and they went probably to version 3. And also the Terra collapse, for example. That's another moment when the market depths of both exchanges moved in the same direction. But maybe this one is even more interesting because we've already seen that the market depths are from a way different order of magnitude in a sense. So it's not even a fair comparison in that sense. But now we look here. We look at the mean market depth per price impact. So we've already seen the plus minus 2% market depth price impact, sorry, and then the market depth from that one. And you can see that the Uniswap has 14.5 times as much market depth compared to Uniswap V2 for a price impact of plus minus 2%. But you can the question is actually why does the difference in the market depth diminishes the higher the price impact? So I give you a little second to think about it. But the answer, of course, lies in this graph, because if you in Uniswap V3, if you want to go more and more, for example, to the right hand side of this distribution, so you want to have more and more price impact, you need less and less liquidity to make that happen. So basically, that concentrated liquidity structure of Uniswap V3 makes it less and less, makes the market depth smaller the higher the price impact is. But obviously, a price impact of 32% is rather unrealistic.
So Mark just wanted to interrupt briefly. You have 5 minutes left.
Oh, okay. That goes quicker than I thought, actually.
Yeah.
Let me have a quick look what I then discuss. Okay, so then we switch quickly to the liquidity provision profitability, and then I switch actually mainly to this one. So what you're interested in, maybe if you look at the profitability of liquidity providers, you have like fee yields, of course, which you get when swappers swap. And you can split this total return into fee yields, inventory holding return, and adverse selection costs. Adverse selection cost is also called impermanent loss. And it's interesting to split it up like this, because then you can really see where one exchange wins from the other in this particular area. So the inventory holding return is a change in the value of the liquidity provider's inventory, purely caused by movements in the token price. And the impermanent loss is how much worse the liquidity provider is from depositing her tokens to the automated market maker, compared to simply holding her tokens outside of the automated market maker. I want to show a video about impermanent loss, but I wouldn't do that for now. It's a bit of a difficult thing to get your head around, but in a sense it is that arbitrageurs, they cause this impermanent loss. So if the price changes in another, let's say at Coinbase, for example, then arbitrageurs update the liquidity pool on Uniswap in an adverse way for liquidity providers. So they suffer from impermanent, basically always suffer from impermanent loss. The liquidity providers, which is not underestimated. I'll skip this one for now. I'll also skip this for now. I think then this is the most interesting figure. So this is then what it graphically looks like. So we have this inventory holding return. You can see that in Uniswap V2 and V3, the distribution is rather similar. It has kind of maybe even a normal shape distribution. So the returns are mainly around zero. Around zero. Sometimes the price of Bitcoin goes up, and then you basically win in that sense, or it goes down. And so it's a bit 50-50. So they're relatively equal in that sense. Then you can see that the fee yields in Uniswap V3 are way higher. But you can also see from the graph that the adverse selection cost, so the impermanent loss of Uniswap V3, is also way higher. So that has to do that obviously in financial markets you have like risk and reward, and the fees are in a sense the compensation for the risk you take. And in this sense, the risk is the inventory holding cost and the impermanent loss. If you then look at it from like at the more in depth in the table, you can see indeed that the mean impermanent loss is way higher or lower in that sense, because those are costs in Uniswap V3. But the fee yields of Uniswap V3 do not outweigh the adverse selection cost. So the mean return on your liquidity as a liquidity provider in Uniswap V2 is significantly higher than in Uniswap V3, as you can see.
So Mark, unfortunately, we're going to need to ask you to wrap up. Do you have any other quick statements you can make to conclude?
This was actually basically my last slide.
Excellent.
So I will give you the conclusion in that sense that the market depth of Uniswap V3 is a factor of 15 times higher than the mean market depth of Uniswap V2, and this diminishes the higher the price impact is. And the mean fee yields of Uniswap V3 are higher than the mean fee yields of Uniswap V2. Nevertheless, due to this impermanent loss, which is higher in Uniswap V3, the actual returns for a liquidity provider in Uniswap V2 are higher. And let's keep in touch, and thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, You can ask that now, but I'm also fine if you call me later because I'm virtually, so I cannot talk afterwards with you. But just give me a call if you want. I'm happy to talk about this interesting topic and sharing ideas.
All right, thanks, Mark. So everyone, if we can all give Mark a round of applause. Mark, are you able to stick around for another few minutes to answer questions?
Yes, of course, yes. If they're
Okay,
not too
great.
difficult.
All right, I think we have a question up here in front. I think that one might not be working. Why don't you use this one? Okay. Thanks. Well, maybe it works actually.
So the question is related to the high fee. For example, when you were showing the change in the formula for the automated market maker, I think this is just assuming on my side that when the formula could switch in Uniswap V3, probably that might lead into more higher transaction costs because you might need more computing to process that if you're using Ethereum or Polygon. So do you think that might be another reason why you're seeing in the last graph that you show that apart from the other reasons where you have a high fee, it's also Uniswap transferring those extra costs that they're generating for the automated market maker when they change the formula?
Not fully sure if I understand your question correctly, but like the transaction costs have not been taken into account at all. So I just mainly look at the position when the position is opened and closed. So transaction costs come not into play in that sense, actually. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Any other questions? Java.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question on the numerical result, but maybe you can. Well, I wasn't able to wrap my head around the market depth formula yet. But could you just give a few words summarizing kind of the intuition behind it? Because as far as I see, the bonding curves, they can both be for Uniswap V2 and V3, they can both be mathematically expressed. And I'm thinking if you have a way to express the market depth, I think the efficiency can be kind of parameterized and can be written in a closed form. So where did you get this up to 3,000 times higher market depth? So how do you arrive at that number? And what is just the intuition behind this market depth calculation?
The times the market depth up to 4,000 times up to 4,000 times capital efficiency you're talking about, I think, right?
Yes. Oh, I remember 3,000, but maybe it was 4,000.
Yeah, well, I think it was 4,000. But anyways, that actually is just taken from Uniswap. That's what they claim. So I've not calculated that myself. I maybe also don't even believe that.
Also, that's what they claimed.
Yeah, that's what they claim indeed. Yes, yeah.
Oh.
So they of course want to advertise their newer version, and so they're extremely positive about their new version.
Yeah, that's okay. But I was actually thinking, theoretically speaking, if you concentrate your liquidity to only the point in price, wouldn't that be kind of like infinitely improve the capital efficiency, theoretically speaking? But again, I'm just talking about intuition here. Okay, so the answer is you just took the number from what they claimed.
Yes, yeah, that's what it is indeed. Yeah.